my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm going to cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. I'd like to take a minute to talk about this episode's sponsor, Aeroflow Breast Pumps. Did you know that breast pumps and milk storage bags, maternity compression garments, even lactation education and support can all be covered by your insurance? Aeroflow helps millions of parents unlock these breastfeeding and postpartum essentials by working directly with your insurance company to get these free essentials shipped straight to your door. Aeroflow offers all major pump brands, including Medela, Spectra, Motif, Lancino, Amita, LV, Willow, and more. Visit aeroflowbreastpumps.com/birthhour to fill out their free and easy qualify through insurance form. Don't forget to use the promo code BIRTHHOUR15 in their online shop for 15% off all supplies and accessories. You've got enough on your plate. Why not let Aeroflow Breast Pumps help support you on your breastfeeding journey? At the end of this episode, I talk with Kate not only about getting her breast pump for free through Aeroflow, but also about taking advantage of their online lactation classes. So stay tuned for that conversation. Before we get to today's birth story, I want to talk a little bit about our online childbirth course. It's called Know Your Options, and this is the course you've been looking for if you just have that gut feeling that you know you should be taking a childbirth course, but maybe the one that's being offered to you by your care provider is not exactly what you're looking for. It might be more catered towards the type of birth they want you to have versus making you informed of all your different options and how to address different things that happen in birth, because as this podcast has shown us, birth is very unpredictable. So we would love to have you check out our 12-module course. You can go to thebirthhour.com/course to see detailed outlines of what is included in the course. You will also get a bonus course called Beyond the First Latch that is an additional 6 modules all about pumping, feeding your baby, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan. And we have a special coupon code for you. It's 100OFF for $100 off enrollment. Again, that's thebirthhour.com/course. Another way you can get involved with the Birth Hour community is by joining our Patreon. This is where you pledge your support of the Birth Hour at $5 a month or more, and you get perks in return, like access to all of our archived episodes. That's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes. We've been putting out birth stories since 2015, and those are all available in our archives via Patreon. And you also get access to our private Facebook community, which is a really great group of people who are there to support you, become friends, and just encourage you on this journey through parenthood. So find out more about that at patreon.com/birthhour. Today's birth story guest is Catherine, and she is married to an overseas basketball player. So she talks about getting pregnant as well as having babies in both France and Spain. All right, let's hear from Catherine. Hi, Catherine. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Great. Well, we have a couple birth stories to get to today, but before we do that, will you tell listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Yes. So my husband and I are Canadian. We met in university. We both played at rival schools, actually, in Canada, in Ottawa. And for the last 11 years, we've been traveling the world because my husband is a professional basketball player. So we live kind of part-time in Canada in the summer months, and then we usually pack up around September and move overseas to Europe. So we've lived in quite a few countries, and now we live in Tenerife, which is an island just off the coast of Morocco. So basically Africa, though it's a Spanish territory.
Okay.
And we've been here for 2 years with our 2 kids, Isaiah and Sienna, who are 4 and 2 years old.
Awesome. Well, I feel like you need to be on a whole nother podcast to talk about all of that because it sounds fascinating. But today we're focusing on your birth. So let's go ahead and start with your first pregnancy and what that was like and where you were at the time.
Yes. So we found out we were pregnant with our son in the summer of 2020. So for a lot of people, they'll remember it was deep into the pandemic. We had just come off a season in France that was cut short because of the pandemic in March, and then went back home for the summer. And we just kind of decided that it kind of was a good time to start trying just because things were going to be, just uncertain, but especially for me, because I also was and am a professional basketball player. So I've kind of dabbled here and there. I play on professional teams as well. So because I knew there probably wouldn't be much for me, we were like, okay, let's try to have a baby. And that seems like a great time. So we got pregnant in the summer. Due date was around mid-April or so. And then my husband signed a contract to go play in a small town in France, nestled in between Lyon and Geneva. And then, around the fall time, we moved to France. And then, things kind of happened from then. France had, for a lot of people who don't know, France had some of the most, strict COVID policies around the world. So it was definitely a really interesting experience navigating pregnancy somewhere where you needed like a paper or a PDF paper version to show police if you wanted to just leave your house. So it was really, really different. But my first language is French. So that kind of brought me a little bit of confidence, just knowing, okay, this is my first pregnancy, but we'll do it somewhere where I actually can speak with people and can speak the language.
Yeah. So how far along were you when you moved?
I was probably close to being done my first trimester.
Okay.
And at the time I was working a remote job for the government of Canada. So my studies were in humanitarian development. So I worked for kind of our foreign ministry in Canada, which had all gone remote by that point, which was kind of a blessing in disguise because I got to keep working remotely during the year during my pregnancy.
Yeah. Okay. So then what was it like finding a care provider in a small town in France?
Yeah. So and as a lot of basketball wives do, we kind of have to rely on the team to guide us in the right direction. So I was assigned kind of the team doctor's choice for an OB. So I met this OB for the first time, probably around, I would say 12 or 14 weeks, and had my first scan. It was through the public system in France, and she was really nice. My first trimester went by pretty quickly, I would say. I had no huge issues, just feeling really tired, and probably didn't help that I moved across the world. So the jet lag was a bit of a struggle, but otherwise everything was great. I think the biggest difference than regular pregnancies would be the fact that my husband couldn't come to many appointments. He could only, I think, come to the anatomy scan. Otherwise, he was kind of on FaceTime waiting for me in the car just because of COVID rules.
So you just kind of went with the doctor that was recommended by the team. And then how did you plan for your birth? Were you able to talk about how things would go, or was it just kind of this is how we do it here?
So she was really, she was your classic OB. She, appointments were not as short as in Canada, I found, just because OBs in France do ultrasounds as well. So you don't have to go to a separate place, which I thought was nice. It was kind of all in one shop. But she was like, hey, you're going to give birth at this hospital, and then it's whoever's on call, which is similar to North America. And she also recommended I book a midwife through, they have this application in France, and it's all medical services in one app. So you can book chiropractors, doctors, anything you need through an app. And she said midwives are actually covered by the public system, and midwives in this context do childbirth education, and they do kind of pushing prep, which I thought was super useful. And they come postpartum as well. So they can come check mom and the baby postpartum at home, which was a huge bonus. So through her, was able to kind of learn about the system a little bit and just set kind of the expectations for what was going to happen.
Okay. All right. So anything else from pregnancy you want to share?
Yes. So as an athlete, I'm used to, working out, not a crazy amount, but just kind of regular movement, daily movement, I would like to say. And at about my 20-week appointment, I would say around the anatomy scan, the doctor was just concerned about the size and the weight of my baby and how low he was in my pelvis. So because of that, which looking back, I wish I kind of ignored her recommendation, but she advised me to stop pretty much any exercise. And I felt that was really hard, just not even really being able to walk my dog, which in France was that was the only kind of time outside that you were allowed to have, was if you had a dog or if you were walking, if you were walking.
Everybody gets a COVID dog.
exactly. Like everyone, you could just like be outside with your dog, which was so nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember just feeling like disappointed about it and then like worried that I was going to go into preterm labor because she was so worried about it. But then like my cervix was fully shut. Like there was never any issues. And I went 5 days post my due date. So in hindsight, now I know more than I knew back then. But that was something that was kind of different just because I was, carrying a big baby, which makes sense because my husband and I are very tall. So yeah.
Okay. I'm interested to hear if that was different for your next pregnancy when we get there. All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about how labor started.
Yes. So I remember being really worried kind of the whole pregnancy. My husband was playing 2 games a week. And actually he was like one of the only people allowed to travel in and out of the country at that point. So France, having really strict regulations, weren't allowing anyone into the country or anyone really out of the country unless you had an excuse, like a valid excuse. So he was on the road a lot. He was traveling all over Europe, all over the world, even at some point. And I was worried that he was going to miss the birth, but I felt like my midwife made me feel so much more confident. She was... she would always tell me that like baby would come when the time was right. And just that put me in like the right headspace, I guess, just because I did spend a lot of time on my own at home with my dog. Family and friends weren't able to visit for the whole year. So it was quite an isolating experience. But somehow, 5 days post due date, my husband and I were watching a movie, and around 10 p.m., contractions pretty much started. And started, I would say, like pretty intensely right from the beginning. Like it didn't take me very long to realize what was going on. And within an hour, they were pretty constant and things were intensifying. And there was no way I was like going to go to sleep that night. So we were, obviously really excited, but at the same time, just kind of anxious for what was to come. So I think it was probably around like 3 a.m. I had tried to lay down. I had tried to labor in the tub. I had done kind of all the things back home. I did have a virtual doula that was assisting me. So she was also a basketball wife. And I think she was in Russia at the time. So she would like check in with me, kind of suggest different positions, and just coach me through it. But around 3 a.m., I think I just really couldn't handle it anymore. So we dropped off the dog at this really nice couple that we met that took care of our dog all the time, and then headed for the hospital, which was like a 10-minute drive. And then once we got to the hospital, we were able to ask for the nature room, which is what they call these kind of like more natural types of rooms in the hospitals in France. So they usually have like a big tub, usually the only room with a tub actually. And then have like the kind of the hooks to hang like a rebozo or the big, birthing balls, all those things. So luckily we were able to access that room because it wasn't in use. And then I labored in there through the night up until I think it was like 11 a.m. when I was really tired. I remember my husband took a nap, and my doula was like on the phone with me, and my husband was having like the best sleep of his life. And I was like, this is horrible. These contractions were really painful. Like I said, like wasn't a slow build, like felt pretty intense from the beginning and really close together. And I felt them all kind of in the pubis area. So I did have some pretty bad symphysis pubis dysfunction during my pregnancy. So SPD, which made it like really hard to like walk around, like put on pants, like all the classic stuff. And I felt like contractions were that times a million. Like I was feeling it all in the front, right on the bone kind of. So I would say that was like the hardest part. And then by 11 a.m., I did ask for the epidural. I think at that point I was about 7 centimeters dilated. So I think when I got to the hospital, I was about 4 centimeters, tried the tub, tried all the things. And then by 11 a.m., 7 centimeters, probably at 7 for probably a couple hours. And I just felt really exhausted. I don't do well with no sleep. I still, as a parent of 2 toddlers, don't do well without sleep. So that was like the biggest challenge, was to be up all night with a labor that really started very strong right away. So the hardest part, I would say, of the entire labor for me was getting the epidural without moving. Everyone knows, like with the epidural, you usually have to like stand still, curve your back. And my husband almost fainted because the screams that I let out during that process were like the worst screams ever, even worse than my screams with my daughter that I had naturally afterwards. So it was just really funny in hindsight. I'm like, wow, the epidural was like the hardest part for me, just because the entire labor I had to move, I had to stand, I was on my feet the whole time. Being forced to kind of sit in that position was so terrible. But we did it, got the epidural, and then I had the best epidural nap of my life. So I think the epidural serves such a purpose, especially I'm a doula now, actually. And I always tell my clients, like, there is a great time to get the epidural for sure. Like if your body's just feeling really tense and, you're feeling really tired and your labor is still like progressing really well. I think the epidural serves such a purpose because I used it, had the best nap. And then the nurses came and checked on me. And I think it was maybe like 3 or 4 hours later and told me that I was like fully dilated and that it was almost time to push. So that's what pretty much came next. And I should add that in France, the entire hospital floor, the entire delivery floor is ran by midwives, especially at least in this town where I was. So for my husband, who does not speak French, I kind of used that. So I was like, if, women wearing like the midwife scrub, they all kind of wear the same scrubs, then it's just everything's normal, everything's going well. But if we see like a doctor come in with the doctor coat, usually that means there's like an intervention coming. So whether it's like forceps, episiotomies, like wheeling into a C-section, of course. So that was like the one sign my husband had to like be on the lookout for if ever like an OB came and he could like help advocate for me, though that never happened. So the whole time nurses were checking in on us, and then midwives also would check dilation and stuff, which I think is also really cool to see midwives and doctors work together all the time. So that was different. So for pushing, so once they came and kind of tapped my shoulder, they were like, okay, you're 10 centimeters, baby's in a great position, it's time to push. So I was really numb with the epidural. And in France, they make you meet, and also here in Spain, they make you meet with an anesthesiologist beforehand. Even if you want an unmedicated birth, usually you're recommended to go meet the anesthesiologist so they can take proper measurements. I am really tall. I'm about 6'1". I weigh probably 150 something pounds, definitely more when I was 9 months pregnant. But I felt like they super dosed me because I couldn't even lift like a toe. Like I couldn't even move my toes. I was so numb. So obviously right away I was a little scared to push, but luckily everything went well. My husband stood behind me and I used him as like, I guess, kind of like the idea of like pushing and tugging something and being able to release the pelvic floor. So I was like grabbing onto him from the back and, doing like the classic purple pushing because I really could not feel anything down there. But luckily my pushes were effective. And I really think I have my midwife to thank on that because she did kind of like put me on my back and made me practice pushing and just kind of breathing through my ribs and being able to release my pelvic floor when we were in our sessions together. And I think it took maybe about 35 minutes to push my son out. He was a big baby. So he was big baby by French standards. So he was over 4 kilos, which means like really close to 9 pounds, which meant he like, after going back home, he had to get like a hip ultrasound because all big babies in France have to get their hips checked to make sure they're okay, which is so funny. But he was pretty long. Like he wasn't like super chunky. My husband and I are both pretty like tall and lean. So everything went well. I did really feel exhausted from the 35 minutes that I pushed though. Like I felt the next day like I had been hit by a train. And I also felt a lot of back pain afterwards from, again, the time where they inserted the epidural. I would say like overall, like had a great experience, even though I was kind of aiming for an unmedicated birth. Like I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So in the end, I did really feel like the epidural really helped me, give me that last little push that I needed to get to 10 centimeters and to have my son.
Did you ever ask about the epidural and like if there's any reason why it would have been so hard for you?
No, I didn't ask about the actual like how they put it in. I think like my contractions were just so close together then that like having to sit through a whole it was multiple contractions, probably 2 or 3 contractions without moving. Felt really, really hard, I think, just because they were so close together. And then, the anesthesiologist, like I remember coming he came back in at some point or just to check, and he was like, oh, sorry, like I just super dosed it. Like he was like really proud of his epidural. And I was like, man, I've heard about these like walking epidurals. There's no way. I'm like, I couldn't even like move like at all. But in hindsight, like everything went well. I've seen it with like my clients here, that I've worked with afterwards, that like, a really numbing epidural can make things a bit more challenging.
Yeah.
If you can't even feel like the pressure or the need to push, right?
Okay, so how was your postpartum?
So postpartum I remember it being quite hard. So it was in 2021, April 2021 is when I gave birth. And unfortunately, professional basketball players in general, this might even apply to like NBA players, honestly, but they don't get leave. Like there is no such thing as like parental leave. So, right away, my husband on day 2 had to go to an away game. And they did ask nicely. They asked me nicely if they were able to take him and drive him to the game and drive him back right away. But it meant I was pretty much on my own with the hospital policies as well. He had to leave the hospital by 7 p.m. at night, and then he could only come back in the next morning at like 8 or so. So I was like spending the nights alone. And I think I stayed probably 3 nights in the hospital. It's quite long for like an uncomplicated birth. Like France likes to keep people pretty long. But in hindsight, it was kind of a blessing, actually, that I stayed there. The nurses were super helpful. I remember the first night I had my son around like 4 or so, maybe, 4 o'clock. And that night they asked me, and this is something that's pretty different, I guess, but the nurses asked me if I wanted them to take my son to the nursery. And right away I was like, no, like, why would I let like nurses take my son to the nursery? Like I was like, I'm supposed to be doing skin to skin. But I think they could really tell that I was really overwhelmed. I hadn't slept much. My husband was gone for the night. At that point, I had never really changed a diaper in my life. And all of a sudden, I'm like left alone with this baby without any friends or family nearby. So I felt really uneasy about it. But then I like started to tear up, and they were like, they put their hand. I remember this nurse like put her hand on me, and she was like, it's okay. Like, we will come wake you as soon as he's awake. We'll come wake you so you can feed him. Like, we don't give them formula. We don't do any of that. Like we just want you to have a little bit of a break. And it honestly was a blessing in disguise as well. Like I just was able to sleep. Like, I think I slept like 4 hours in a row. My son was I guess that because he was a big baby, and who knows if that's true or not, but he slept a lot and he was very sleepy. So he took a 4 hours nap pretty much as soon as he was born, or like a bit afterwards, I guess. So I was able to sleep and then just kind of felt like myself again. This next nights he slept in the room with me, but that first night was like so nice to be able to rest. We did have some issues with breastfeeding. My nipples really went through it, like bleeding, cracked nipples, all of that. They suspected maybe a tongue tie. I went to like osteopaths, chiropractors, anyone that I could try to see in this like pandemic world still. Yeah. I tried to go see, and we did a lot of like manual work to kind of release the tension in his jaw. And eventually it passed. Like eventually things went well. I don't know if it was a latch issue, if it was a tongue tie issue. Right now no one's ever told me he has a tongue tie since then. And he breastfed almost 7 months and was a really happy and big baby. But I just remember it being hard, like having to like be up at night, like breastfeeding, and then my husband having to leave for 2 practices a day. And it probably was really hard on him too, like just having to walk away from his wife, having to go on these road trips right away. And seeing me kind of left behind with cracked and bleeding nipples, just kind of, pouting in my corner. It's definitely not for everyone. Like that was and I think everyone went through similar things during COVID too. I don't think my experience was worse than anyone else, but I think, man, do I wish I had like my mom there at that point. But unfortunately, that just wasn't a possibility with like the restrictions in place in France.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, that's hard. Okay, well, thanks for sharing that story. And then what was the kind of age gap there when you decided to try for another?
Yeah, so we somehow decided, my son was such a great little feeder, like so mobile, so active. He's still super tall for his age. I don't know. He was kind of I don't like to say that, but he was like an easy baby, an easier toddler.
It's okay to say that.
Okay. So then we decided, okay, we could have another one. Let's do this again. So we got pregnant I did actually ended up miscarrying. So I had a miscarriage, like a really early, like chemical pregnancy kind of miscarriage in the summer of 2022, and then was able to try again like the following month, and then got pregnant again right away. So they ended up being like due at the same time, which was so funny. So exactly 2 years apart. And that year we had packed up and we had been living in Spain. So we were going back to Spain for our second year in the city that we were in.
Okay, so having to figure out another country's maternity system again, what was that like?
Yeah, so...
And not speaking the language this time, right?
Exactly. So unfortunately, we really loved France. Obviously, for me, France was so easy to live in. I could get around, I could work, I could do things. It was just really different. But my husband's dream was always to play in Spain. Spain has one of the top domestic leagues outside of the NBA in the world. So when he got an offer to come play here, we were really excited. So we moved here with our son, who was 4 months at the time. And then it was the following year, we were in the same city. So we were just north of Portugal, but in Spain still. And yeah, same kind of story. We were, assigned a team doctor. I did stay back a little longer that year. So I, again, was working another remote job for the government, and we stayed home probably until November. And I actually got to taste a bit of the Canadian healthcare system, which I had heard so much about because obviously my friends and family had had babies in Canada, but myself didn't really get to experience the first time around. It was honestly really eye-opening, especially in the province that I'm from. So I'm from Quebec, the French-speaking province in Quebec, or in Canada. And it took a really long time to have an appointment, very, very long. So I think my first appointment again was around 14 weeks. Luckily, things had gone pretty well the first time around. And then it was separate appointments. It was multiple appointments. You had to go see the OB in person. Then you had to go to a separate area to do your blood work. You had to go see an ultrasound tech at the major hospital. So I just felt like I was taking a lot of time off from work, which made me feel really uncomfortable without telling them what was going on. So that was definitely really different. And I wasn't really impressed with the system, and I was kind of happy that I was going to Europe again, just because I knew it was a one-stop shop for everything, and I was excited about it. Especially with my second child. At that point, I had already gone through pregnancy and labor, so I felt a lot more confident about it. However, obviously, had to figure out the Spanish system, which is very similar to the French system. So I did have an OB again. She was a really cool OB. She was Chilean, I think, but living in Spain. She spoke decent English, but by that point, I felt okay, communicate. I understood a lot more than I could speak, let's just say, in Spanish. Mm-hmm. But it was through the private system this time. So Spain has a public and a private system. So I would go to it looked like the oldest little building in the town, and it was a private hospital. It really wasn't that big compared to their public system looks like our public system or our system in Canada, where it's just these major teaching hospitals. They're really big, really usually pretty nice, have some areas that are really nice. Whereas the private system was different, a little outdated maybe. Okay. And it was a good experience. I would go in, there's a lot more ultrasounds in Europe, I would say, and that's something that's different. So every month you have an ultrasound almost. This time around, because I had a toddler in daycare, I had to cancel a lot of appointments or postpone them because my toddler was so incredibly sick all the time. And made me really sick as well. So I think that's just one of the realities of being pregnant with a toddler at home. But again, had a pretty uncomplicated pregnancy, had the same SPD pain throughout my pregnancy, but this time was able to get treatment during my pregnancy, which in France, because of the restrictions, it was really, really hard to see someone during kind of the peak of the pandemic when I was pregnant. So I found that chiropractor. I met a chiropractor from Brooklyn, New York, who lived in Spain. His name is Tony, and Tony really helped me deal with the pain. So that was really different. So something that was really different during this pregnancy, we found out we were having a girl, which was really fun. Obviously, I would have been okay with being a boy mom. You kind of get used to it once you have a a son first, I find. But I was really excited to have a girl. I have an older brother. I'm the youngest daughter. So it's kind of the same that I grew up with, which is really cool. So for this pregnancy, I was able to stay active the whole time. I was carrying a tiny baby, like really small, so small that, after she was born, she was followed for a long time. And we can talk about that later. But I wasn't carrying the same, let's just put it that way. So I was able to keep up with my regular activities, whether it was like weightlifting, doing like cycling, like spinning on the bike, swimming. Swimming was amazing. Like in the last trimester, I felt so good swimming, just to alleviate kind of all my little kinks that would come up during pregnancy. So that was really motivating and really different, that I felt pretty strong throughout the pregnancy. And I think it really helped kind of just, again, like alleviate all those little pains that would come up. Like, yes, I still had the SPD pain, and I would make sure I wasn't overly doing anything, because when I did go for like a really hard spin ride, then I would feel it the next day for sure. But overall, it was really nice to not have to like let go of my way to release my stress, right? Which I think for a lot of people, movement is kind of therapeutic.
Yeah.
So that was different. And I would work out at the same gym that my husband practiced at. So we would just kind of go in together during every morning, and I would do my thing, work out, and then I could just kind of hang out until he was done practice. And then we would leave together. So such a different experience. Obviously, him being able to attend the appointments to see baby, which he only got to do like once with my son. That was really cool as well. And I would say pretty uncomplicated pregnancy, other than whatever illness my son brought into the house that year. I felt pretty good, other than like, I think I had a sinus infection like 3 times. So I had to go on like 3 rounds of antibiotics. So that wasn't fun, but otherwise, like, I can't complain. It was a pretty good pregnancy.
Okay. And so did you make plans for a different type of birth? I know you mentioned kind of a spoiler that you had no epidural this time, but what did you do to prepare?
Yeah. Again, I kind of went in with the same expectation, just being like, okay, if I can go natural as long as possible, I won't be disappointed if I need the epidural. Like, I just want to see how it goes. Knowing that last time the pain was unbearable in the SPD area was a good reminder, I think. So I just didn't, I was like, maybe it'll be unmedicated, maybe not. And I, again, was working with my virtual doula, Kate. She was so amazing. I think this time around, she was in Milan in Italy. So funny how we're just all over the world.
Yeah.
So we just kind of went over, birth plan and like birth preparation stuff. Because my pretty much only viable option in Spain was to give birth at the hospital. Like, people don't really do as many home births in like big cities in Spain. Like, I know some like islands do it. It's pretty like, I don't know, it's just different. But in usually like France and Spain, like, they want you to give birth at the hospital. They don't really have birth centers. So I was like, okay, it's going to be a hospital birth. That's okay. And it's also like kind of ran by midwives. I think the biggest difference in Spain is that OBs do deliver babies. Midwives are there in the province that we were in, because I've learned it's different everywhere. The midwives don't catch babies, so they don't deliver babies. They can check dilation though, and they can admit you. But an OB ultimately is the one that's there to help with delivery. So that was different than France, where France, it was like only midwives, unless something required more attention.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I, had around the same due date as my son. So didn't know if I was going to go early or if I was going to go late. Had no expectation really, just because I went over the first time around. That's pretty much the pregnancy.
Okay. So how did labor start this time?
This time around, it was so different. I felt Braxton Hicks like pretty early on, and had Braxton Hicks, I would say like early 3rd trimester up until the end, which I don't know if it's me just not knowing my pregnant body the first time around or not feeling them, but I definitely I don't remember feeling that with my son. So I had like Braxton Hicks, which they weren't painful. It was just like that tightening of the uterus, that tightening of the belly. And then I remember my husband being away. Again, he was away a lot. And he was pretty far one time, like all the way south. We were all the way north in Spain. He was all the way south. So at least like a 2.5 hour flight. And that night, I started feeling contractions. Based on my previous birth, I was like, oh, like this could be it. But again, confident mom. That year, I had my sister-in-law living in the same city. Fun fact, my husband's brother also plays professional basketball. And
oh my gosh.
and it gets better. He married my college teammate, who was one of my best friends. So we're just like, we were so happy that year. We were both pregnant, both living in the same city.
Yeah.
And it's just like she was so helpful with like my son, my dog, like, so I really was like,
sounds like the plot for like a rom-com like novel.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. I felt she was early on in her pregnancy. So I felt really bad for her because she was going through all of the first trimester pains, but, she was such a blessing. Like she helped me so much. And I was like, worst case, I just give birth with Alex and not my husband. Like it is what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was away one night. It was like, as soon as I would go to bed that whole weekend, I would have the prodromal labor. So the start-stop contractions for like 4 hours. And then eventually I would fall asleep and wake up the next morning. And they never reach a certain pattern. They were kind of intense, but not like insane. I could like stay lying down the whole time. So I was, concerned, but I was like, this isn't it. I'm going to fall asleep. My husband's going to get here the next day. And that's exactly what happened. So I think that happened like the Saturday night. He came home the Sunday morning, and then happened again. Like I would go through a whole day of like being a busy toddler mom. And then I would go to bed and then not be able to sleep for 4 hours because I would have these contractions. And then boom, go to bed again. So it happened for, I would say 3 or 4 nights in a row. We threw my son's birthday a week early just in case. So had a huge birthday party for him on the 17th. And then the 18th of April, I had a doctor's appointment at 2. And that day I woke up, had a great night's sleep, which was rare. Like I never really slept well in pregnancy. I'm not a great sleeper in general, I think. But in pregnancy especially, I'm waking up all the time, peeing, having SPD pain every time I change sides. And I just change sides all the time because I can't get comfortable. So I, for one, felt like I had a great night's sleep. And I was like, you know what? This is the day. I just felt it. I felt that this was the day that my daughter was going to be born. I called my sister-in-law and I was like, let's go for a hike. And I, at the same time, had these minor contractions that were starting. So not as intense as my son, really felt like a slow build. So I had these little contractions. I was like, who knows if it's the prodromal labor. I was 38 weeks plus 3. So still kind of early, didn't really expect that it was going to be the day, but who knew? So I called my sister. I said, let's go for a walk. We lived in Santiago de Compostela, which is a big pilgrimage town. So a lot of people do this huge pilgrimage across France and Spain and Portugal, and they arrive in our city. So we have all these beautiful trails where we meet people from all over the world. Honestly, it was my dog and I's favorite activity to go on these trails and see who we would stumble upon, all these pilgrims who are just so friendly and so happy. So we went for a hike. I was kind of keeping an eye on the contractions, but again, they really weren't painful. They were cramps, but didn't feel like much. So we went for probably an hour and a bit, walk, hike, whatever you want to call it. And I just felt like movement was going to get this baby out. I just knew I had to keep moving and that would make things easier. So, and my sister-in-law was so funny. She, was a first-time pregnant mom and thought that baby was just going to slip out of me. She was like, oh my gosh, should we be doing this? I can't help you in the middle of the woods. And I was like, don't worry. It takes more time. My husband went off to practice and then was like, if anything, just call the manager and he'll get me out. But I was like, no, it's fine. I have this 2:00 appointment. I think it was for a non-stress test, which they do in Europe. So, we'll see if I am dilated or even if I am in labor then, because really I felt so normal. So 2:00 rolls around, we go to the appointment. My sister-in-law we had the same doctor as me. So she came along for the appointment, which is so funny because she, turns out my labor kind of intensified once we got there. And her and my husband were giggling, looking at the contraction monitor, being able to predict when another contraction would come along. And then at the same time, she was just there and asking her questions to the OB when I was the one in labor. So that was around 2. Spoiler alert, my daughter was born at 5, pretty much. So really not that long after. Doctor said, okay, you're clearly in labor. I think I was 3 centimeters dilated, which for me felt insane. I was like, wow, it felt so hard to get to 3 centimeters the first time around. Like I couldn't believe it. And I was like, this is like hard, but it's still like, it's really not that hard. I'm able to like stay still on this bed, do this 30-minute non-stress test. So my doctor says, okay, well, go home. I'll see you probably later tonight. And we'll have this baby probably tomorrow. And I was like, okay, sounds great. Like I'm going to go pick up my son from daycare and see you soon. So I leave. We go back home, really not a far drive away, probably like a 10-minute drive, pick up my son from daycare. And then I would say probably around like 3:30 is when things got really intense, or 3 o'clock. By then I was in the shower and I was struggling and I couldn't get out of the shower. So all of a sudden it kind of went from like not that intense to really intense. I felt the best relief in the shower using kind of hot and cold on my back when I was having contractions. So I think when I was having a contraction, I would put the water really, really cold to distract me and then go back to hot after, in between contractions. My husband was keeping in touch with our doula. And then at some point, like both of them agreed that I should probably get out of the shower. I had been in there for an hour and I still had to drive to the hospital and my contractions were really close together, probably about 2.5 minutes apart. And I was doing all the things. I was moaning. I was really in the zone. Like I couldn't be bothered. I was really in the zone. So we head to the hospital. My sister-in-law drives us just because it's in the middle of the city and you can't park. So we head to the hospital. I get there. People are trying to speak Spanish to me. And all of a sudden, the little understanding I thought I had just went over my head. And I was like, I can't speak Spanish right now. They asked me what was wrong. And I was like, I'm in labor. That's what's wrong. Like I don't think they really knew what was happening either. I then proceed to go up to the birthing floor. They're trying to ask me like meal choices. Like I really don't think anyone had a clue how far along I was, myself included. They're, asking me like my meal preferences and this and that. And I was like, I just have to pee. Like that's what I kept telling them. I was like, I just really have to like empty my bladder. So the midwife that was there, it was his first day on the job, his first shift. He was a midwife man. And he's like, okay, go pee and then we'll check your dilation. So I like go pee. And as I'm peeing, the classic, and I've heard this through your podcast, like the classic, like I think I have to pee. And then you get there and no, all of a sudden you have to poo and you're pushing. So quickly got out of the bathroom. It was so small. He was like, you have to get out of there. Like there's no way we all fit in there. So I get out of the bathroom. So this is like, mind you, probably less than 10 minutes total that I had been at the hospital at that point. Like I really hadn't been there long enough.
Wow.
I was in the process of like changing gowns and ended up being fully naked. I think I was really primal in that moment and just took off all my clothes and stayed naked. And then instantly I just started pushing. My body just, was doing like fetal ejection. And I was standing up naked and yelling because I didn't see my doctor around. I hadn't seen her. And I thought we were cool. We were friends. Like she told me she would see me in a few hours. And there was only a midwife man there who I knew wasn't supposed to catch my baby because they had told me. And I was like, where's the doctor? The baby's coming. And I was yelling. And all of a sudden I was like leaning on the bed. I was up on my tippy toes. My husband's like slowly backing away from me instead of like helping me. He's just like slowly backing away towards the window. The midwife is setting pee pads on the floor. And basically I had my daughter in not that many pushes, really. She came out, her head came out on call. So like in her bag of waters, which I so wish I had a picture of because then her shoulder came out and like ripped everything open. And there was, all the stuff on the floor. It was like such a different experience, such a crazy experience. The midwife did catch my baby.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't really have the reflex. Honestly, I was up on my tippy toes. The crowning was like such a weird feeling to be doing like without medication. And it happened so fast. So then he like unwrapped her cord. I think her cord was like around her neck a little bit, unwrapped it and then put her right on me. And I just kind of, they guided me to the bed. And at that point, a lot of people had like stormed into the room. Still not my doctor. And yeah, I was able to just kind of go right into skin, had no tearing. So with my son, he was a bigger baby. I had only like a minor 1st degree tear. Like I think they put in 1 stitch, like really nothing dramatic. With my daughter, no tear at all, was able to do skin to skin for an hour right away. I think my doctor finally arrived like an hour after giving birth, and she was like laughing. She was like, I was just having coffee down the road. I was like, hey, classic, like Spanish people are so relaxed. Like they're just, and she's not even Spanish, but just that culture. Like they just love to like have their afternoon coffee somewhere. And clearly she was a bit further away than she said, but she was like, wow, you did so good. And then she told me that the midwife was working his first shift ever. And I was like, that is so funny. He's never going to forget that day.
Yeah.
And neither will I. And yeah, they took great care of us. I think I probably scared everyone on the birthing floor. I was just this crazy, like English speaking lady, just kind of yelling and being super primal. But yeah, it was such a different experience. My daughter was around 6 pounds, maybe 2 or 3 ounces. So way smaller than my son was. Right away I could tell. I was like, wow, she's such a small baby. But she was a girl and I just expected her to be smaller than her brother for sure. And I was carrying differently too. I really didn't look as big. I didn't gain as much weight. And such a different experience.
Yeah. I feel like, was your sister-in-law, did she feel justified in being concerned about a fast labor?
Yeah. Afterwards, she could not believe it. It was so funny. We were talking about it. She was like, I just dropped you off. I was like, I know. She had barely just arrived back home and we were already texting the family that Sienna had arrived. So yeah, she definitely felt validated.
That's so funny. All right. So how was postpartum this time?
So postpartum went pretty well for me, meaning I felt more confident. I stayed in the hospital maybe 2 nights. And then my son was able to come visit. My daughter was such a good breastfeeder right away. I was like, wow, this is how it's supposed to be. There were never any issues. She was just, overall so different. However, never really slept. She was kind of colic 101, which we had never experienced before. So from the first night, my husband was in the room with me and we were like, wow, she just makes so much noise and she just sounds so uncomfortable compared to our son who just slept straight that we had to wake him up to feed. So that was really different. Though I had the breastfeeding down, I felt really good physically because obviously I had no medication. I had no tear. I had a really quick labor. I was able to get up and shower within 2 hours of giving birth, which was not the case last time. So definitely felt better on that side of things. But we got out of the hospital 2 days postpartum. And then, so maybe 2 nights. So maybe she was 3 days. And then by day 4 or 5 postpartum, my son, again, this kind of is the topic of this pregnancy. My son had gotten sick from daycare and had really, really bad coughing and fever for days. And he passed it down to my daughter, who was only 4 days old. So we had to go to the hospital this time go to the actual huge public hospital because our private hospital did not have a NICU. And unfortunately, my daughter had to be hospitalized at day 4, of life, just because they weren't sure. They had to run the test and make sure that she wasn't, she didn't get anything that was bacterial. So that was hard. It was definitely hard because, again, I was separated from my family. I stayed with my daughter. The NICU was so great. I'm a really tall person and they made sure I had a couch at least to sleep on. They didn't have beds. My daughter was in that classic, it was a bubble. So she was in a glass room, a small little glass room in a bassinet, all hooked up. It wasn't an incubator. But every time people went in and out, they had to take off kind of a robe, put on a new robe every time, new gloves, different than the other NICU babies. So my daughter just looked like she was a little lab baby. And I was able to sit in there and breastfeed her and do all that. It just obviously was not optimal. It just felt, I felt like I just wish I could be at home in my bed with her, right? I definitely did feel some tailbone pain from just sitting on this hard hospital chair all day, from sleeping on pretty much a love seat that wasn't made for a person my size.
Yeah.
So that was definitely hard. We never ended up knowing what she got, but they said it was likely just viral. So that was definitely a blessing. And it just was an extra kind of bump in the road that she had to get through.
Yeah.
Following that, we got back home. Everything was okay. Finally, we were healthy again. Everyone was healthy. My son was so happy to be a big brother. My daughter got to meet her uncle, like our nanny that we had in Spain that had helped us out. My family was able to come visit like a month after, which was a different experience than in France. And just so different. We headed back to Canada around 2 months postpartum. And, she ended up being followed for most of her first year of life just for being a small baby. And because she was born in Spain, we never actually got her like genetic testing results done, the one that they do at birth. So that just meant that in Canada, they had to run every single test under the sun. She wasn't gaining a lot of weight. She was just a really small baby. So we tried everything from bottle feeding to formula feeding. And I think that kind of cut our breastfeeding journey short. Unfortunately, she only breastfed for about 4 or 5 months before she was completely hooked on formula. And in the end, nothing was ever wrong with her. She was just a small, petite girl. And she still is to this day. She's feisty and definitely has turned our lives upside down, but for the best, in the best way. She just has a character of her own and doesn't let people step on her, even though she's usually the smallest. But now she's finally looking like she's a part of our family because we're all very tall. So she's finally kind of gaining height and weight. But yeah, nothing was ever wrong. She was just a really small baby. And unfortunately, we had to go through a lot of testing because we never really got her results. They maybe were sent to another address or just really hard to track down in the Spanish system, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a lot of stress though for it to kind of drag on for a whole year.
Yeah. For sure. It was definitely stressful and just kind of unfortunate with like all the needles, all the blood drawn and all that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad we got both of those stories in here. Do you want to share any resources?
Yes. So your podcast, I think is just, was a blessing. I listened to it on all my walks. When I was working from home, I would just plug it in my ears. I think it was just so great to hear other stories, other positive stories. And otherwise, my doula, Kate, she was awesome. Her name is Kate Pangos. She's a virtual doula. And I also did some hypnobirthing stuff through, I think it's the Positive Birth Co. They have a really cool book and some tracks that I did listen to and I thought were really useful.
Great. Well, thanks for saying that about the birth hour. And we will link to those other resources on the show notes. And where's the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah. So I am now a virtual doula myself. I do in-person births in Canada only in the summer months, but I help other women like me, other expats like me, give birth abroad. It's kind of become a niche. There's so many of us doing it. So I'm at Catherine Trayer Doula on Facebook, Instagram, and my website is catherinetrayer.com.
All right, great. Well, thanks again for sharing your stories, Catherine.
Thank you so much.
Now I'm going to chat with Kate about Aeroflow breast pumps and how you can get your breast pump and other things for free through insurance, like their online classes, accessories, all kinds of great things. All of that is at aeroflowbreastpumps.com/birth-hour. All right, let's hear from Kate. Hi, Kate. Thanks so much for coming on the Birth Hour today to chat with me about Aeroflow breast pumps.
Yay. Hi, Bryn. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, you reached out via Instagram about Aeroflow and your experience with them, and I was so excited to talk with you. So will you just tell people a little bit about, how you found Aeroflow and the process you went through for using their services?
Yeah, for sure. So it was actually through the Birth Hour, through your podcast, that I heard about Aeroflow and decided to just fill out the form. It's like a very simple form you fill out online where you put in your insurance information and then like Aeroflow does the rest.
Yeah.
And so they got me a free breast pump. I think it was the Spectra is the one that was the one I chose through insurance. But Aeroflow will actually show you like all of the different pumps available to you, how much they cost through insurance. Some of them, like you do have to pay a little bit. And then they show you the ones that are fully covered. And so I decided, I chose the Spectra and they sent it to me. And then I think I got like an email or a text that said like, hey, thanks for, using Aeroflow. You should also sign up for our lactation classes. And, you get tons of those sort of promotional emails.
Right.
And I didn't think much of it. I was like, okay, whatever. I'll take a look at this later. And then I started looking more into it and I was like, oh, actually these classes look pretty cool. They were fully virtual and they were covered by insurance. And so I decided, I was like, what the heck, let's do it. And I signed up for, I think, 4 different classes. I only made it to 2 of them, but the 2 that I went to were Lactation 101 and Pumping 101. And they're just like such great classes. I was like so surprised by the quality of the classes. They're taught by, is it
IBCLC?
Yeah. And they like just gave a ton of good information about like starting breastfeeding off right. And so it also would be helpful too for people who are newly breastfeeding, like just kind of work through some like, potential breastfeeding issues like latching or positioning. But yeah, I contribute a lot to my success. So my daughter is 4 weeks old now. And we had a pretty solid start to breastfeeding. I've been exclusively breastfeeding, and I contribute a lot of it to having that support from the class. The way the classes run too they're live.
Oh, cool. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, they're virtual. So you can join via Zoom.
Yeah.
But they're live. And so the instructor is there like teaching the course. They're also really just like super good teachers. Like I felt like the way they presented information was really good. They had tons of like visuals and videos, like live demonstrations where they had like a baby doll and they were showing different like positions and ways to get baby to latch. Mm-hmm. And so they are live though, so you can ask questions. And so you're able to like ask questions in the chat. You can, unmute and like have a conversation back and forth. So very like helpful for like if you have specific questions too about lactation.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Especially like you said, like even after baby arrives to be able to like look at the positioning of the baby doll and like position your own baby on screen and be like, like this, or that's great.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And like the Pumping 101, like this is my first baby and I had never pumped before. Mm-hmm. And so I have the same pump that they were using in the demo, the Spectra.
Oh, nice.
And so it was really cool I kind of like walked along with, like did the demo along with them on the same pump, which was just really helpful having never used a breast pump before. Like,
yeah.
They look kind of scary, at least to me. They looked pretty scary. And so it was nice to like be able to sort of walk through with the instructor and get a demo.
So when you were signing up for it, was the scheduling, were there like several a month or like lots of options? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. It was pretty convenient. They gave a few times a month, I want to say, and like I want to say they were like different hours too.
Okay.
But it was like scheduling was really, really easy. I remember like, cause they have, all your information, like they have insurance information already. And so they do all the back end work of clearing this with insurance. Cause they're, classes run by professionals and they do cost money, but insurance covers the cost. And so, they would like take attendance at the beginning of the Zoom call. And then they did like all that back end work to make sure it was covered by insurance. And so I didn't have to do anything except like put in my name and email to sign up. So yeah, like really easy.
Awesome.
And again, like kind of going into it, I was like, I'll give this a try, kind of see what it's like. And then I was just like captivated. I remember after the call, getting off particularly the Lactation 101 call, and just like being like to my partner, like, oh my gosh, you've got to hear like what I learned.
Oh, cool.
Like he was like, wow, you see, like, you're like an expert now in lactation. I was like, I feel like it. Like, I feel like I'm like, have a lot of good, solid information. So yeah, like super pleasantly surprised by how informative and just helpful the classes were.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that I had posted about Aeroflow on Instagram and you responded like, their classes are amazing. And so I knew you were passionate about it enough to like respond to an Instagram story.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. And I knew they had lactation education, but I wasn't fully aware of the format and everything and the fact that they're live. I mean, that's like having your own virtual lactation consultant. So that's amazing.
And I had taken like a childbirth ed class, paid for, like it was a community one that I paid for here. And I live in Minneapolis. And it was like, one of the weeks we went over lactation and it was like similar information, but like free, like I was like, and it also like it was kind of went more in depth because the Aeroflow class was specifically a lactation class, like the Lactation 101 class, what I'm thinking of. So yeah, it was just like very quality, like good information.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to add this definitely to our resources on the website and our childbirth course, because we go over a lot of that stuff as well. But the live aspect, I think, is just so great, even if it's a refresher for, second or third time, or you already took a class, just something to kind of get a refresher and ask questions and things like that. So,
and there are some other classes, like the other ones I signed up for but didn't end up making. There was like one on like maternity leave, and your kind of like, I think, lactation stuff around leave and like going back to work.
Right.
But yeah, they were all covered through insurance. So
very cool. Well, I'm going to have to reach out to Aeroflow and audit these classes so that I can talk about it more as well. But thank you so much for shining a spotlight on it.
Yeah, for sure. Highly recommend. So when you get that email or that text that says, hey, do you want to also sign up for the classes? You should do it. Because like I said, I was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, whatever, like promotional email for Airflow, but.
Right. And we're all paying so much for insurance, like we might as well get as much out of it as we can.
Totally. It was well worth it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Kate.
Yeah, of course, Fran. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks again to Catherine for sharing her stories with us, and to Aeroflow for sponsoring this episode. Remember, you can always go to aeroflowbreastpumps.com/birthhour to fill out their free and easy qualify through insurance form, and they will take care of everything for you. I've yet to hear a bad thing about Aeroflow, and I highly recommend you check them out if you're expecting. If you want more information from today's episode, head over to thebirthhour.com and just search for Catherine's name to find her show notes page.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.